Hello, my name is Joe and welcome to my channel. Out of all the questions the RWBY Volume 9 teaser has generated, the one I'm most interested in is what's the deal with the Flaming Knight? And let's be honest, if you watch my channel, you already probably know why. So while I did spend a lot of my breakdown video discussing one theory of this character, I'm gonna do a more deep dive here to talk about all the theories I've thought of, as well as any ones that I've come across. Spoiler warning is of course in effect. From the small snippet we've seen of the Knight thus far, we can only tell a couple of things. One, that they are surrounded in flames, and two, that they wear rusted white and gold armor that either is Jaune's armor from Volume 8, or is very similar in appearance to it. From this small amount of information, two schools of thought seem to be most prominent. Either this is Jaune, or it's someone connected to Jaune. The latter has less options for who it could be connected to it, so we'll cover that first. Now, if this figure isn't Jaune, I've seen two major theories for who it could be proposed in a couple of places. The first is that it's Pyrrha. This would definitely be interesting, but I personally don't see it being the case. While Pyrrha obviously has a very important connection to Jaune, if she did appear, I can't think of a good reason she would be in this armor. Particularly because this version of armor, he only got like a year and a half after Pyrrha already died, so there wouldn't really be much reason for it, I don't think. The other option I find really interesting though, that being that the Knight in the trailer is Jaune's ancestor. From Jaune's first scene in the series, we've seen how important Jaune's view of legacy is to him. And while this is most prominent in Volume 1, we have had a constant reminder of it throughout the series with Crocea Moors. Jaune's ancestral sword and shield with his family symbol emblazoned on the shield's face. Aside from Weiss's glyphs, this is probably the emblem we're most familiar with from how prominently it's displayed. And if you'll remember, that very same ancestral sword broke at the end of Volume 8. A meeting between Jaune and one of his ancestors could make for some really fun narratives. There are a couple of ways this could work. One way could be that, at some point in the past, one of Jaune's ancestors fell into this world, much like Alex did in the original story. Most likely this would be his great-great-grandfather, the original owner of his sword, but you never know. The other option would be that it's some sort of vision. I discussed in my breakdown video that there will be probably some trippy mind stuff going on throughout this volume, so I could totally see Jaune's guilt-ridden mind conjuring an image of his ancestor to berate him for destroying his family's honor. It could also be something like his ancestor's actual spirit if there are afterlife aspects to this island. However, I don't think this theory is quite as likely either. The main piece of evidence connecting this figure to Jaune is how the Knight has his chest piece. But with that being Jaune's armor that he got in Atlas, there's not really any evidence that his ancestor would have worn armor like that. Now, it could just be the RWBY reusing the design to make the resemblance more obvious, like how they made Summer just slightly changed RWBY Volume 6 model, though that also had to do with time crunch, I believe. But I'm just not sure. No, what I think is most likely is that it is Jaune in the armor, but in what way is still to be seen. I covered one theory more in depth in my breakdown video, but to cut a long story short, my initial thought was that Jaune's grief and guilt over what he did to Penny transformed him thanks to the island's strange aspect of seemingly being somewhat controlled by emotions, into what he sees himself as, a faceless symbol of death. The Knight, based on the Knave of Hearts. And I still really like this theory, but let's cover a couple others. One option is, as with the ancestor theory, this is some kind of vision. I think You All Right's breakdown video mentioned the idea of this being a vision of future Jaune, while the chained figure was future RWBY, if they stay on their current path. I actually think that's a super cool idea, and would be really interested to see if that were the case. I had another similar idea, though. Now, I have talked ad nauseum about my theory on Jaune potentially using the Sword of Destruction at some point, and I know how it does add nausea to Jaune haters when I do, so I like to whenever I can. But seeing this gave me a thought. What if the Sword of Destruction actually is on this island and Jaune actually does find it? The sword spirit releases on its own and tries to tempt Jaune into using it, showing an image of a powerful knight, maybe even having Cinder lay dead at its feet, the flames being the aftermath from their battle. If that was the case, the figure we see directly after the knight may even be the sword spirit, with the purple and silver color scheme as opposed to the normal blue and gold, showing it's more in line with the god of darkness than the god of light. It's definitely a stretch, but it could be a cool direction for it to go. One comment I had on my breakdown video pointed out that in Through the Looking Glass, there is a character called the White Knight. Based on the chess piece of the same name, this is an old man and inventor who guides Alice for a short time. What makes this interesting, besides the obvious white armor connection, is the aspect of being an inventor. I've seen a couple of people suggest that Jaune could have created the chained figure, perhaps time moving differently for him on the island and him getting lonely and in need of a friend. Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of this idea, personally. Mostly because I'll find it pretty annoying if Jaune is the only character aged up by the island, but also because Jaune has never really shown the engineering capabilities of Pietro or even RWBY, so it just wouldn't make much sense in my opinion. The final major theory I've seen is that Jaune is the knight, and has changed because the chained figure, who many believe is based on the Queen of Hearts, did something to him. Either stealing his memories, his emotions, something like that. I even saw one person suggest that the chained figure could be turning Jaune into a mechanized person like them. And, well, I think that part is probably too dark for RWBY. I mean, there was an Invincible episode with the same premise. I do think the chained figure being responsible is the most likely case, aside from my original theory or maybe the it's a vision theory. One other thing I wanted to bring up before I ended the video, though, was this idea I've seen circulating that Jaune is gonna die in Volume 9. The main reason seems to be that in the teaser, the knight is surrounded by fire, and, you know, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake. This really isn't enough to suggest that, in my opinion, especially when Jaune's biggest enemy literally has fire as her primary personality trait, and she isn't there. But Jaune dying is a concern I've had for this volume. Partially because Jaune is my favorite character, you know, sure. But also because it wouldn't be narratively satisfying if it did happen. And that is because of a little thing called the Rule of Threes. For those of you who don't know, the Rule of Threes is a prominent concept in Western media stating that narratives work best when things such as characters and story beats are grouped into threes. Now, despite the name, this isn't actually a hard and fast rule by any means, just a general pattern to help story flow easier. You can kind of see this in RWBY itself with how it clumps 3 volumes together into general arcs for the story. Going by this pattern, Jaune can't die yet because he still needs to face Cinder one more time to round out their arc together. I mean, you could technically count him being there when she killed Amber as their first face-off, but I don't think you should, since it was barely an exchange, there were no personal stakes at that point, and it just doesn't fit well with the narrative arc. Having them face off one last time could create the perfect 3-part rivalry. Their first face-off at Haven being a clear and obvious Jaune loss, him barely landing a single cut while she just demolishes him. Their next fight in Volume 8 was still Jaune's loss, but with a very different feeling this time. He still lost, but he prevented her from getting the thing she had desired most, the maiden powers. Cinder's victory this time is a Pyrrhic one. The final fight, this one likely being alongside RWBY since they never actually fought Cinder together, interestingly, would result in him finally winning against her, though there's a good chance it would be at the cost of his own life. This also has potential to have another narrative parallel with who Cinder tries to kill. In the first fight, it's Weiss, but Jaune is able to heal her. In the second, it's Penny, and Jaune is forced to finish the job for the greater good. And in the final fight, it could be Cinder trying to kill RWBY, but Jaune sacrifices himself to save her life. So yeah, while I am worried about if Jaune dies in this volume, it's mostly because of how much wasted narrative potential it'll have regarding him, Cinder, and RWBY. So I really hope it doesn't turn out to be the case. But hey, those are just my thoughts. What do you think? Agree? Disagree? Think Jaune's ancestor is gonna give him a real earful for breaking the family sword? Let me know in the comments down below. And, subscribe. I do a lot of RWBY stuff, so you might find something you like. Till next time, safe journeys, my friends.